Hey everyone, I am so glad to have you on this episode of the Marketing Companion today. And we're going to get into a very interesting tale of personal branding pivoting from our friend Amanda Russell. But before we do, I just want to remind you that this show is brought to you by Brevo. This is it's a tough world out there these days. And it's hard to break through the clutter, and so many of the listeners of the Marketing Companion have found Brevo. It's easy to use. It's very reasonable in terms of the pricing. There's so many great options for you to connect with your customers in new ways. It's a world-class program available to you at a kind of a local sort of price. If you haven't checked them out, you got nothing to lose. You can go to brevo.com/marketing companion and try it for free. And if you do sign up, be sure to use the promo code companion to get 50% off of of your uh, of your plan. And I need to get that out of the way because, whenever I get into these conversations, I forget to talk about the sponsor. And that would certainly happen today. So, Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I am great. And so, man, I've known you for, I don't know, at least I'd say 6 or 7 years at this point. And we started out we knew each other as like academics. You were teaching, I was teaching personal branding, influence. We sort of compared notes. We aligned on some things and we disagreed on some things, and that made it interesting. And then as I've got to know you over the years and we have conversations, it's like every time I learn something more about you, it's just like, wait a minute, you did what? Wait a minute. You know who? And and your brand has been evolving, and it's been fun for me to have a front row seat to see how you're evolving as a person. And our recent discussions, used words like, oh my gosh, this is scary. Oh my gosh, did I bite off more than I could chew? Oh my gosh, this seems like such a risk, which means this is a perfect topic to talk about publicly on our podcast. So tell me a little bit about what we're going to get into your new project. You're going to be launching a new project, and we're going to get into that. But first, take us on a little journey, as much as you'd like to share, about sort of the tortuous path that led you to where you are now. Because you've had a lot of success in a lot of different areas. And like, what's led you to this moment in your life?
Thank you. Well, first of all, you are recalling almost verbatim things that I've said. And it's funny to me because you're probably the only person that hears those things because I do a really good facade of being very, very sure. Um,
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. I'm like, well, I would be even, I'm even shocked to hear that. I'm like, wait, I did say that? Oh, yeah, I did. Um, so, it's interesting because in our exchanges earlier, you called it a pivot, and I found that really interesting. And for some reason, as you know more than anyone, my backstory and like this idea of always trying to make it and always the next thing, is always been like an obsession of mine. And the word pivot, like, almost triggered me, but not in a bad way, in a way that I was like, maybe like I think that's why I'm so afraid, why I've been so nervous to um to do and to change to no, I wouldn't even say change ways because I'm so obsessed, even though I don't want to admit it, now that I've achieved certain levels of success, you know, uh, subjectively in certain fields, but much further than I had when I was, in my 20s with nothing, that you almost get locked in like this cage where it's just like in athletics. We used to say like it used to be great to win, but it's also really shitty because there's nowhere to go but down. It's almost like you don't want to race again because once you
Mhm.
win, the only thing that can happen is either you have to win again or you lose. Second place is now losing. And I think that's where I've struggled with this. And I think I've had to shift in thinking a lot about when you use pivot. And I was like, why? I don't like, I don't want to say pivot. I don't want to say pivot. And I was like, why? Because I think I see it as I want to believe I want the world to think of these kind of things because I don't want it to be something that other people are afraid of too, because that's why I'm afraid, is that it's an iteration, which
Yeah, that's
the
probably a better word. Yeah.
right, which is the heartbeat of what is business and life. And I was thinking like, imagine it like I started my company, my first company that became successful that I was able to kind of, pay bills and sell, was started in like 2009, 2010. Can you imagine that every company was still doing it the same way as they were in 2009, 2010? And yet, so I'm teach and as I got into academia, I'm like, I'm sorry, but I feel a little bit like a fraud in the past few years because I am teaching what I did years ago, and the rate of change is so fast that, like, okay, great, you could do something even as 2 years ago, but if you're not doing it now, things have changed. And success, I think, creates this illusion that there's like nowhere to go but down. And the truth is that even at the top, and I had a really great professor in business school that said this. He said, "You don't get better just by doing it more. You get better by constantly iterating and evolving and asking yourself the questions of how can you be better? How can you learn? How can you?" Otherwise, he's like, everybody at the age of like 100 would just be like brilliant and successful. And so it really got me thinking in this whole through this whole process, and the really big obstacle has been my own ego. Has been my own ego being like, well, what if I do it? And what if like and what is the it? The it was leaving academia, leaving
Hmm.
a name of a big institution,
Uh-huh.
and having that as like the buffer, really. And but I
Mm.
do love to own things. And I thought, why to build a community, to build this like I'm calling it a marketing show because my background's on YouTube and I really do love the YouTube platform, but it's like a podcast, a show, but in real time, instead of just like talking about it, like to start from ground zero in this space and do it, but not in a way that is just talking about theories and businesses that have been successful, but like really actually trying to create like making it my own laboratory, my own research study where everybody that watches or whatever, it becomes kind of like a co-creator um in this show. Like we are creating the theory as we go because the world is changing that fast. And
Well,
that
wait, I'm going to stop you because before we get into the show, I want to go back to the original question is like, what happened to you? Where like one of the things you told me was, oh my gosh, I've been telling people, I've been teaching one thing, but I really haven't had the courage to do it myself. So like, what has changed in you that made you realize it's time to go a different way?
um I still don't know if it is if I think the idea of doing it the way that I wanted to do it, the personal branding in the way that I would like to do, and we might disagree on this, but is very much a full-time job, like or at least a very big part of to do it in the marketing field as a marketer where you're on all these platforms and it's a lot of work. Just YouTube alone is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And in this space, I really wasn't there yet to be able to even devote that time because I had to get into the craft itself. I had to have some experience and build that where I really do. I think, the timing just wasn't right. It's like I can't say that I'm a, classical pianist if I'm just an aspiring classical pianist. So it's almost I feel like now I'm in a space where I'm like checked a certain number of boxes on the practice side, on the academic side, on various different things that I'm like, now I feel like I have something to offer, and it's very clear to me. I think before it wasn't clear. Other than being an athlete, that was always very clear, and I'm not that anymore. And so between losing that identity and the next identity, I don't think I've ever been uh, fully sure what to call it.
Mhm.
That-
So you talked about, the difference in, what you were creating and what you were teaching like 10 years ago compared to now. Talk a little bit about that. What are some of the things that are more challenging for you today as you launch a new platform compared to some of your earlier ventures? Like what seems you've used the word risk and like this seems like a big risk and it seems scary. What is that risky, scary part to you?
Uh, well, I, I because I mean, by nature of being in the marketing space and talking
Yeah.
about building a community, I
Hmm.
you have to be able to do it. It's like a coach that's a really great coach that and some of the greatest coaches in the world, right? Terrible at the sport, but great coaches. But
Hmm.
I believe that I've been teaching now, I've been out of that space for a little while and I've been teaching marketing and branding and how to do this and I haven't been doing it myself. And that everything has changed. So the risk is I try to do it and I fail because no nothing is guaranteed. So
Hmm.
but I'm confident that, and I think the risk is also that then people publicly see you fail. But I am confident that there will be things that don't work. But if you keep iterating and pivoting forward, it will eventually you will eventually get to your to the I don't want to say finish line because you're never finished, but you will eventually get to where you need to be if you are if you are constantly committed to, okay, that worked, that didn't work, let's learn, let's, this we're going too far down this wrong direction. And I think that doing this as a live case, making myself the guinea pig, is it's a way of holding myself accountable too, and a
Hmm.
way of removing, removing any ego and like honestly
Hmm.
getting out of I feel like I've been trapped in this ivory cage for several years that I'm like, oh, I don't want to like break the
Do you,
glass.
do you mean do you mean academia by that? The ivory cage?
I do, yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
So so I mean you made a name for yourself as an athlete, and I'm probably skipping a few steps and maybe have this out of order. And then you made a name for yourself as one of the first YouTube influencers and built a huge audience there. And then you were an entrepreneur, created several businesses, sold the businesses, eventually moved into academia. Now, I know you worked so hard to figure out this new place for you. And I think this is especially interesting because a lot of people, they work on their personal brand and then they kind of stick in that lane forever. So talk about the process you went through. And I know, I mean, we exchanged documents and you were working so hard on this for so long to figure out what is the new thing. Talk a little bit about the process before we get into the thing.
Yeah, the process came for me, which is really hard for me to do. It was a lot of like staying quiet and listening. Um, and like this active listening, I did a lot of that, especially, at your uprising actually as well. And engaging in dialogues more than monologues, and understanding other people and really studying, not even just in real time, but just other people's journeys across different industries, and not just people, but brands, and trying to figure out like what like no one is one. I think the big struggle that like a lot of people have is like, oh, well, I don't want to be pigeonholed as this, or I don't want to be pigeonholed as that. Well, if you look around it, like we all think we're these like special unicorns, but and we are, but everyone is, and everyone's multifaceted. So that doesn't mean that you can't be you like it's like Hermes or like some of these brands. They get known, do one thing really, really well. And what is the thing that like makes your heart sing? Because I think where originally I was so pushed in so many ways to really champion female health in women's sports and change in women's sports.
Mm,
And it is something that is, I can honestly say, I didn't even want to be involved. I wanted to be behind it. Um, the amount of inbound even today to get in front of this, to do keynotes talks on on major stages on topics that I wouldn't I can't I have no level of excitement for that I'm turning them down because
mm.
for whatever reason I just don't in my heart. I believe in the cause so much. It's just it's not even that I'm embarrassed or anything. It's that it doesn't excite me.
You don't want to be identified with that. That isn't going to be, you don't want to be Amanda, the person who does this. You want to reach beyond something
I
like
mean,
that.
I would if I no, I honestly, it's even that. I would. I just don't I'm not interested in it. Like I'm
Yeah.
not like it's not what like I spend all my time, all
Mhm.
my exciting time, hobby time is like looking at community and behavior and brands and marketing and growth. I don't spend it researching like women's health.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So,
that's very telling to me because I'm like,
yeah.
wow, what's coming easy and this one is, you know, I'm gonna work at it.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that you said at the uprising, which I know impacted a lot of people, is, working on your personal brand gives you the luxury to have options. So, I mean, you were involved in the women's, health issues, and, you've been in academia and you've made a lot of great connections. So you did have the luxury of sort of picking and choosing and following your heart. So now let's start talking about
That's
what is the new project?
Yeah, I was just go back to that for a second though, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because you asked before like what took so long or whatever. This idea of working on a personal branding, it's almost like very self-altruistic.
Mhm.
Like and I know I'm not a psychology person and the only thing I think I remember from like my psychology 101 course is like my Maslow's hierarchy. But I think a lot about that because like talking about personal branding and like fulfillment and purpose, like that's all really a luxury. And I think that's where I've learned, that's what I've come to a place to learn to even think about that. Like most of my life there was no well, do I want to do this? What do I want to be known for? What do I like? What do I want to do next? I mean, that wouldn't have even that's such a luxury. Like, who has time to think about that? You just do. You do whatever needs to be done to get to survive and to get to the next thing. And
Mhm.
I can't imagine pondering like, oh, well, I would like, well, what are the things that I like to be like to be known for, and what am I good at, and what it just didn't
Mhm.
work that way. And
Mhm.
so it is an iteration. It's almost like, you got your basic needs met, and you got these needs met, and then you're kind of reaching this level of like self altruism where like, okay, now we have these, and that has also kind of contributed to this cage that I mean I say this for myself, but I think I use myself, but I know I like to say I know this is true for many, many people, whether they want to recognize it or not, is that it's a luxury to have so many options and to have all our basic needs met. And I think that's why, there's so much mental health and depression. I mean, I think there's been over 30 new diagnoses of mental health in the past like 30 years or something, all with it, and it's mostly in like in first world countries. There's no surprises that we're having more time to think about that, and I think that new programming around personal branding, around building a business, around what success is, needs to be put in place for the future generation because we're not equipped right now with the tools to navigate how the world is now
Mhm.
versus where it was 50 years ago,
Mhm.
which is why the show.
Yeah. And why I teach a class on personal branding. So talk about the show. what is new and what is now. And you've mentioned this idea of this lab and you're being a guinea pig. So spill the beans.
Yeah, so this show, so I what I one thing I found with a lot of podcasts and business shows is that they're kind of like museums in that they do a lot of things about like the artifacts of past successes. I mean, that's what academia is theory and learning what has worked. And I'm not saying dismiss history at all. I think there just needs to be a combination of it. And so I'd like to do a lot of stuff that is real time, that has, like, I use the word risk, of like not just like people that are facing challenges now. When I say, I called it Amanda's playbook because a playbook kind of plays on this idea of sport, and there's always a new game. There's always a new challenge. And so how can we tackle those, and ranging not just from like solopreneurs or people that are trying to just build their presence and their executive brand, but also like founders and executives leading major Fortune 500 companies. And there, because there is, we, at the end of the day, we're all human, and there's so many parallels, and it's so lonely not being able to express those. And so to create this kind of environment where it's almost encouraged to like, rather than toting your successes, like, what are you struggling with? And it was it, the sh- it was the show has really been born out of my own frustration of how many times you hear somebody say, this is what works for me, this is what's worked for me, but their business was like me, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Okay, it's like getting directions from, like, I use a lot of running analogies, but like someone that ran a marathon before they even created the route. They just ran 26.2 miles, but it could have been hilly, it could have not been hilly. But our landscape is continuing to change. So if so by nature of whatever we're doing today, I'm not saying yesterday is completely obsolete, but we need to be doing things in education that are changing. Like, if you look at the way education was formed, it was formed in a completely different time and era. And so, how do we create a model, a pedagogy that, yes, embraces history and what's worked, but also goes, okay, what are we dealing with today? And then has the communal aspect of everybody that's watching is co-creators. They are there to, like, we are so much smarter when we're together. Like, if every person was like, okay, this guy here, he's a, he's a luxury brand CEO, or he's a plumber, and he's having this customer service issue or this respect issue or whatever it is. Like, imagine the, and you do this, you already do this with your, within your Rise community, but like, if they're all the different brains seeing this could kind of weigh in and say, you know what, this is my experience, or we could all solve each other, like, solve each other's problems in
Mhm.
real time. And the
Yeah. So this is going
exponential.
to be this is a YouTube show. It's a YouTube video.
Hmm?
So like which is one way communication. It's you and are you going to have like guests or
I will eventually. I think I'm gonna do what you do now, is having a few main characters.
yeah.
I call it, you call them co-hosts. A
Yeah.
few
And
main characters.
yeah.
Um, right now, because I agree with, that's one thing I've learned from you is, and what I learned from failure before is that I connection chemistry is everything. Like, you can have like whoever on your show, but if there's no camaraderie, or like, it is painful. And then it's also not fun either. And if it's not fun, I don't want to do it. Um, so there will be characters, but there'll be various different forms. Some formats, it's going to be a rotation of some formats being more like case study example, some being real-time experiments where the, like, I'll actually create, like, here, go out and try this, and let's see what work, like, let's see what comes
Mhm.
back. And yes, and then I will have guests eventually. I'm going to go back to not answer the question directly, but I'm going back to how I really first started my roots, which was like very simple. Just get started. Just start with what the topic that I know that I'm really interested in, that
Mhm,
fascinates me, and you start to find your tribe and your audience, and the opportunities just start to open themselves. Not that
mhm,
you don't work hard and go after them, but when I look back, I'm like, I didn't overthink starting a fitness channel on YouTube. I was like, you know what? Get a flip cam and here, this is what I do when I can't run because I can't run. This is what I do. And then
mhm.
all of a sudden I was like had every different kind of partner and co-host, from like morning show hosts to like doing my burpees in the Plaza Hotel ballroom. Like it all evolved, but that wasn't, yes, there's a plan, but it's not set in stone.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're doing it you just get started and it evolves. Absolutely. So you talked about like experiments. Like what does that mean? What experiment will you do like on a YouTube series?
I'm playing with it, right? I'm actually kind of like playing with some of those ideas right now of how do I do it on YouTube versus
Mhm.
having an interactive audience. And I'm deciding, and I actually think I asked you this question, like, should I stop? Because I believe in kind of creating a really great program first and then starting to build that audience before you add another like a Discord or a Slack or something that's interactive. And back when
Right.
I did YouTube, they didn't even have that. So
Yeah.
it really was a community within the community and newsletter and subscription.
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
but I think like one thing that keeps coming to me is like, how could you recreate certain like experiments? And maybe we bring a video camera and do this in some way, but like when you overhear, like let's say like the other day, I'm like, in the train station and I'm in Toronto and I know Toronto, but I mean not that well. And I overhear two people in the train and
Hmm.
they are raving like, oh my God, you have to go to Sassafras, this restaurant in Toronto, apparently.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I know the restaurant actually. I've heard of it.
Hmm.
There is the reviews, if you go online, the reviews are like incredible. Like that's the place to go. That didn't influence me. I'm eavesdropping on these strangers who have no, like there's no said credibility or whatever, and I'm like, how do I recreate that as an experiment, right? That's no amount of five-star
Oh,
review,
that is interesting. Yeah.
right? And it's like they don't even know me, but there's no motive. So I'm like, these are the kind of experiments that's like, okay, so what? Because then, we're saying things like social proof reviews.
Hmm.
Okay, but that's even now becoming not, I won't say archaic or
Hmm.
old, but how, like, influence has evolved so much.
Yeah.
It's no longer top down, it's no longer about pushing information. So
Hmm.
it's fluid, it's coming from all directions. So how do we make ourselves, our brands, the magnet that
Hmm.
frames? And I think that those are the kind of, I don't know if that helps, but those are the kind of experiments for like, and I'm trying to figure out how do you do them? Like, do you do it candid camera style? Which I
No,
very
no,
well
but you got you have my wheels turning because it's just like, all right, if you have these little ideas, how could you actually activate an audience to help you? How do you crowdsource
yes.
experiments, crowdsource research? And especially if it's just something as simple as you're doing something in your home or doing something, trying something at work, placing something on a table and watching people's reactions. I mean, I think that's really interesting, really
We should do one. We should
amazing.
do one at South by. When we walk around, Mark and I like to walk around South by Southwest, and I get such a kick out of it. Like some kind of observation. But I agree. I think that's the crowdsourcing of this.
Yeah.
Like, why does one person have to figure it all out? Like, if we put that out there, I feel like the crowdsourced information, we're going to exponentially create something even better.
Yeah. So we got to wind up here. So what's the name of the show and where are people going to be able to find it and when does it start?
Also, I have to, not to give you too many accolades, but I really should. Mark is the reason, like, you have literally been on the ground with me from, as I said, you're the only person that's ever heard me. Now everyone on Mark's podcast had said, kind of lost, scared, risk, like, what did I bite off? I tell no one in my life or anyone this thing. So, but he's been like holding my hand through and being like the wind beneath my wings. And actually, even applauded my idea of using the word Amanda's playbook for the show because I was also not. I didn't like the idea of using my name. I felt that felt narcissistic or whatnot. And then I'm like, well, we're talking about being human here, and I can't. I'm not going to use my name.
Mhm.
So it's Amanda's Playbook. It's the name of the show, and it will be found on YouTube and LinkedIn and across all podcasts. All what do they say? What's that thing that they say on like that's official? That's all.
Omni-channel. Omni-channel.
Amanda's Playbook is going to be available on YouTube, and my goal is to do one show and one newsletter every week, and it's as
Every
simple
week.
as that. And then it'll be available on all listening platforms or whatever they usually say on podcasts.
Well, we'll have to check back in a few months on your progress and your learnings, and you got and don't miss. You can't miss. I say in my classes, consistency is more important than genius. Don't let us down now. Got to hit that show every week.
So
So thanks everyone for listening to us. Hey, we
thank you.
are in our 13th year, almost our 14th year, and we have never missed an episode in 13 years. So there you have it. There you
Um,
go. Take that, podcast world. And thanks so much for being here. We never take you for granted, and we will see you next time on The Marketing Companion.